You know, thinking back, I never would have guessed my life would spiral into such a messed up drama. For the longest time, I was convinced Sarah and I were just another happy couple. Sure, we had our ups and downs like anyone else, but I believed we had it figured out, or at least that's what I kept telling myself. We had just moved into this new neighborhood, and I thought it was a fresh start, a chance to create new memories, meet the neighbors, and live that peaceful life we both wanted. At first, everything seemed to be falling into place. We quickly hit it off with Jack and Lisa, the couple next door. Jack, I'll give it to him, had that kind of charisma that just drew people in, successful in his business, a smooth talker, always seemed to have things under control. Lisa, on the other hand, was more quiet, reserved, but really sweet. I used to joke that they were the perfect balance for each other. Little did I know, that perfect balance was just a damn illusion. In the beginning, everything felt normal, better than normal, even. Sarah seemed happier than I'd seen her in a long time. Our weekends were spent exploring new spots in town, trying out different restaurants, and going for hikes. But like anything that seems too good to be true, the cracks started to appear. And when they did, they didn't just show, they split wide open, and once I saw them, there was no turning back. The first sign something was off with Sarah hit me out of nowhere. She started spending way more time with her friends, which wasn't really her thing before. Don't get me wrong, it's not like I didn't want her to have her own life, I'm not that guy, but when her girls' nights turned into staying out until all hours of the night, something was different. Then came the excuses, late nights at work, heavy traffic, losing track of time, always something. And then, there was the phone. The damn phone. She used to leave it lying around, charging somewhere, not really paying much attention to it. Now, it was always on silent, glued to her hand, or tucked away in her purse. I get that privacy is important, but this was something else, it felt like she had something to hide. And the texts. Her phone would go off, and her face would light up like a kid on Christmas morning. She'd smile, laugh a little, type something back quickly, and just as fast, that smile would vanish the second she realized I was watching. She got really good at hiding it. For a while, I thought I was just being paranoid. You know that gut feeling that tells you something's off, but you push it down because you don't want to look like the jealous guy? That was me, for months. Sarah's behavior shifted, too. She had always been the one to plan our date nights, snuggle on the couch, or make plans for the weekend. But now, it felt like she couldn't even stand to be in the same room with me. Our conversations became colder, more distant, and it wasn't just the usual rough patches you go through in marriage. It felt like she was there physically, but not really there at all. I started to feel invisible in my own house, like I was some kind of ghost just drifting through the rooms while she acted like I didn't exist. I kept trying to brush it off, telling myself it was just a phase, work stress, maybe, but every time I did, something else would happen to remind me that I was just lying to myself. One night, she came home smelling like a cologne that definitely wasn't mine. Sure, maybe she brushed past someone at a bar or hugged a friend, but it was way too strong to be just an accident. That's when I knew, deep down, that something was really wrong. I'm not proud of it, but I started doing things I never thought I'd do. I started keeping tabs on her, checking what time she'd leave, when she'd come home. I even started glancing at her calendar, making sure her late nights at work lined up. At first, they did. But then, one day, they didn't. That's when I caught her meeting up with Jack. Yeah, good ol' neighbor Jack, Mr. Charisma himself. I followed her that day, feeling like I'd completely lost my mind, turning into that guy. But I couldn't stop myself. She'd been acting so strange, and my mind was racing with 1,000 different scenarios. So there I was, trying to stay far enough behind, feeling like some low-rent private investigator. And there they were, sitting together at a cafe just a few blocks from our neighborhood. This wasn't some business meeting or casual friendly conversation. The way they leaned in close, the way she laughed at his jokes, it was like I was watching her on a date. Her smile, the sparkle in her eyes, all those little things that used to be just for me, now aimed squarely at Jack. I felt this heavy pit form in my stomach, like the ground was crumbling beneath me. I snapped a picture right then and there. A small part of me thought, maybe you're jumping to conclusions, but deep down, I knew the truth. I could feel it. That was the first time I really felt that raw, gut-wrenching sense of betrayal. But it was far from the last. This was just the start of a nightmare that would unravel everything I thought I understood about my life, my marriage, and who Sarah truly was. I couldn't confront her, not yet. I needed more proof, needed to be absolutely certain. And I couldn't go to Lisa either. I mean, what do you even say? Hey, just so you know, I think your husband is hooking up with my wife. No, I had to keep quiet, at least for a little while longer. Keeping all that rage bottled up was eating me alive. Everywhere I went, I had this image in my head of Sarah and Jack, laughing, talking, touching. Every time I looked at her, I felt nauseous. Every time I saw him, I wanted to wipe that smug grin right off his face. But on the surface, I kept it together. Inside, though, I was a complete wreck, a storm of anger, confusion, and yeah, a little bit of fear. Fear of what would come next, fear of how this would change everything. One afternoon, I was pacing around the neighborhood, trying to clear my head, when I ran into Lisa. She was out walking her dog, and for a moment, I thought about just nodding and moving on. I mean, what was I supposed to say to her? How could I even look her in the eye, knowing her husband was sleeping with my wife? But she called out to me, and there was no avoiding it. So, I played along, made some small talk, asked her how she was doing. I remember watching her while she spoke. She had this gentle way about her, kind of quiet, a little shy, but there was something else underneath it all. Something sharper, more aware. Maybe it was just my mind playing tricks on me, but I swear I saw a sadness in her eyes, like she was carrying her own burden. And that's when it hit me, maybe she knew. Maybe she had her own suspicions, or maybe, like me, she was just trying to make sense of a life that was slowly slipping out of control. So, I tested the waters. I brought up relationships, casually, like it was no big deal, asked how things were between her and Jack, mentioned that Sarah had been swamped with work lately. That's when she let her guard down. She sighed, gave me this tired, weary smile, and said things had been distant with Jack. He'd been working late, distracted, preoccupied. Sound familiar? Yeah, it sounded like an echo of my own marriage. But what really hit me was how she said it, like she'd come to accept it, like she had convinced herself it was just normal. She kept talking about how she trusted Jack, how they'd been through rough times before, but he'd always stayed loyal in the end. I wanted to shake her, to tell her to wake up, but I bit my tongue and kept it inside. I couldn't just lay it all out for her, not right away. But the more she spoke, the more it became clear, she had no idea. She was stuck in the same lie I'd been trapped in, trying to explain away all the red flags. And it tore me up inside. I hated seeing that glimmer of hope in her eyes, knowing it was all built on deception. So, I made a decision. I couldn't leave her in the dark, not when I knew the truth. Lisa, I finally said. She must have noticed the shift in my tone because she stopped mid-sentence and looked straight at me. There's something I need to tell you. It's about Jack and Sarah. Confusion flickered across her face, then caution. What are you talking about? She whispered, her voice barely holding steady. I took a deep breath. I couldn't keep it in any longer. They're having an affair. And just like that, the words hung in the air like a punch to the gut. For a second, I thought she might faint. She blinked, shaking her head as if she was trying to clear the fog, trying to reject what I'd just told her. That's not possible, she stammered, forcing out a laugh that sounded more like a sob. You've got to be mistaken. Jack, he wouldn't. Lisa, I cut in. I wish I was wrong, I really do, but I'm not. I saw them. I followed Sarah one day, and she met up with Jack. They weren't just having a friendly chat, it was intimate. She still didn't believe me. She shook her head, looking at me like I'd lost my mind, like I was making the whole thing up. So, I did what I had to do. I pulled out my phone and showed her the picture I'd taken at the cafe, Sarah leaning into Jack, his hand resting on her arm. It was all there, as clear as day. When Lisa saw it, I could see the moment it clicked, the moment her world came crashing down. She snatched the phone from my hand, staring at the photo like she could burn a hole through it. Her breathing got heavy, tears filled her eyes, and then came the anger. She tossed the phone back at me, muttering, "That son of a." We sat down on a bench after that, both of us silent, lost in thought. What was there to say? Everything we thought we knew about our lives, our marriages, had been ripped apart in a heartbeat. And as much as I despised Jack and Sarah for what they'd done, my heart ached for Lisa. She didn't deserve this. Neither of us did. But when the tears dried up and the shock started to fade, something else took over, anger. Real, unfiltered anger. Lisa clenched her fists, staring off into the distance, and I could practically see her mind racing. "They think they can just do this and get away with it," she muttered. "They think we're just going to sit back and take it." I shook my head. "No way," I said. "There's no chance we're letting them walk away from this without consequences. We'll make them pay." And that's when we came up with the plan to give Jack and Sarah a taste of their own medicine. I know it sounds crazy now, but in that moment, we were running on pure emotion. Revenge was the only thing that made sense, the only thing that felt right. The idea was simple: make sure they catch us together, make sure they walk in on something they'll never be able to forget. "Let's set a trap," Lisa said, her voice low and intense. "Let's make sure they see it, every second of it. Let them feel what we're feeling." I nodded, feeling that same burning rage, that same hunger for payback. This wasn't just about getting even. It was about taking back control, about not letting them think they could wreck our lives and walk away unscathed. And maybe, just maybe, it was about finding something, anything, that could dull the pain they'd caused. Lisa and I started putting our plan into motion. We picked a night when we were certain Jack and Sarah would be out, probably sneaking around like they'd been doing for God knows how long. We timed it perfectly, making sure they'd come home at just the right moment. And when they did, they'd walk in on us. We wanted them to see everything, to realize just how badly they had messed things up. Was it the right thing to do? Honestly, I didn't care at that point. All I knew was that in that moment, it felt like the only way to take back a piece of what they'd stolen from us. We were ready to do whatever it took to make them pay. I'll tell you one thing, planning revenge is a hell of a lot easier than actually going through with it. When Lisa and I sat there plotting how to bring down their little love affair, it all seemed so straightforward: get together, make sure they catch us, make them feel the pain. Simple. But the closer we got to that night, the more I realized just how tangled it all was, how much hurt we were both carrying. Still, there was no turning back. We set the date, a Friday night when we knew they'd be out, probably pretending to be somewhere legitimate while sneaking around behind our backs. We guessed they'd use the same lame excuses as always, and sure enough, we were right. Sarah told me she had to work late again, something about a big project, and I pretended to buy it, plastering on that fake supportive smile. She probably thought I was still clueless. Lisa said Jack had some networking dinner, and when he left the house that evening, we knew exactly where he was headed. Just like we planned, Lisa came over to my place, and you could feel the tension in the air. We both knew what was about to happen, what we had to do, but that didn't make it any easier. There was this heavy silence between us, a mix of nervous energy, anger, and sadness. I remember her standing in the doorway, just looking at me for a moment, like she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. I didn't know what to say either, so I just invited her in, poured us a couple of drinks, and we sat there in silence for a while, letting everything sink in. Eventually, we started talking, not about the plan, but about everything else. Our lives, our marriages, our feelings. Lisa opened up in a way I'd never seen before. She talked about how she felt like a stranger in her own house, how invisible she was to Jack. She said every time he touched her, it felt forced, like he was just going through the motions. I told her about Sarah, how her smile had lost its warmth, how she used to look at me like I was the only man that mattered, and now I was just there. Just part of the furniture. It's hard to explain, but sharing that kind of pain with someone who truly got it felt like peeling back a layer of numbness I didn't even realize was there. That closeness, it became something more. It wasn't just about getting back at them anymore. It was about finding some kind of comfort in someone who'd been hurt just as badly. Before I knew it, we were holding each other, clinging like we might fall apart if we let go. And maybe we would have. The kiss, it happened naturally, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. One moment, we were talking, and the next, our lips were together. For just a brief second, all the anger, all the betrayal seemed to melt away. It was just the two of us, trying to forget, trying to feel alive again. I'm not going to lie and say it was some romantic, perfect moment. It was messy, it was raw, but it was real. And it was what we both needed right then. One thing led to another, and we ended up in my bed, tangled together in a way that felt both desperate and freeing. I didn't care about Jack, about Sarah, or about any of the fallout. The only thing that mattered in that moment was that Lisa and I were in this together, that we could lose ourselves in each other and forget, even if just for a little while, how messy our lives had become. The sex wasn't tender, it wasn't soft, it was fueled by this wild mix of anger, desire, and an unspoken understanding that we were both broken. Maybe this was our twisted way of trying to put the pieces back together. We didn't know exactly when they'd return, but we made sure we were ready. The plan was simple: give them a show they'd never forget, make sure they saw every second of it. When I heard the front door creak open, and their voices drift in, Jack laughing about something, Sarah chiming in with that familiar flirty laugh, I felt my heart thudding in my chest. Lisa must have felt it too, because she squeezed my hand, giving me a look that said, "It's time." The next few moments felt like watching a slow-motion train wreck, one I couldn't tear myself away from. They walked right into the living room, and there we were, tangled up together on the couch. Lisa's back was to them, but I could see everything, their faces, the shock, the rage, the confusion. Jack's eyes went wide, and for a second, he just stood there, frozen, like his brain couldn't register what was happening. And Sarah, oh, Sarah, her face twisted into this blend of disgust and fury, like she couldn't believe I'd sink to this level, like I was the one who had betrayed her. Then, all hell broke loose. Jack rushed at me, shouting something I couldn't even make out. I barely had time to roll off the couch before he was on me, throwing a wild punch that missed my face by inches. I jumped to my feet, shoving him back, and suddenly we were standing there, fists up, ready to tear into each other. "Have you completely lost your mind, Danny?" Jack yelled, his voice cracking like he couldn't grasp what was happening. "Have I lost my mind?" I shot back, furious. "How long have you been screwing my wife, Jack? How long?" Sarah started screaming, her voice sharp and hysterical. "How could you do this to me, Danny, after everything we've been through?" she shrieked. "Everything we've been through?" I let out a bitter laugh. "You mean all those nights with Jack? How could I do this? How about you explain yourself for a change?" Lisa, still sitting on the couch, wrapped herself in a blanket and stared daggers at Jack. "Now you know what it feels like," she said calmly, her voice steady despite the chaos erupting around us. The shouting didn't let up. It went on for what felt like forever, accusations, insults, everything flying back and forth. Jack and Sarah tried to twist it around, tried to paint Lisa and me as the villains, but we held our ground. We laid it all out, every lie, every betrayal. And then, in that moment, I saw the truth hit them. I saw it in their eyes, the guilt, the shame. They had nothing left to defend themselves with, no excuses, because the truth was right there in front of us all. Jack lunged at me one last time, and I shoved him back hard enough that he tripped, knocking over a lamp as he fell. Sarah screamed and rushed to his side, like I'd just wounded her precious lover. And that's when I knew I was done. Done with the lies, the cheating, the endless excuses. Let them have each other, they deserved whatever mess they'd made. Lisa and I walked out of that house together, leaving Jack and Sarah behind, tangled up in their own disaster. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel like the world was falling apart around me. I felt free. It was messy, it was chaotic, but it was real. And I knew that whatever was coming, I'd be ready for it. The chaos didn't calm down after that night, it only grew, thickening like a storm cloud ready to swallow everything in its path. You think that once you confront the truth, things will get better, like ripping off a band-aid and letting the wound finally heal. But that was just the beginning, the start of a battle that would burn everything down around us. The next morning, I woke up in my own bed, and it felt emptier than ever. Sarah hadn't come home, and honestly, I wasn't expecting her to. I figured she was either with Jack or hiding out somewhere, trying to make sense of everything. I could only imagine the conversation they were having, trying to spin the whole situation to make it my fault, or Lisa's fault. But I didn't care anymore. Let them twist the story however they wanted, it didn't change what they had done. By midday, the storm hit full force. Sarah came bursting through the door like a hurricane, her face red, her eyes wild. "What the hell is wrong with you?" she screamed, her voice already cracking like she was on the edge of breaking down. "How could you do this to us? To me?" I just sat there on the couch, my face blank, letting her words bounce off me like they meant nothing. I was done being the guy who took the blame, the guy who bent over backward trying to keep her happy. I let her yell, let her rant, let every bit of her anger spill out, and then she finally stopped, breathing heavily, waiting for me to respond. "You done?" I asked, my voice cold, detached. The question seemed to catch her off guard, and she stood there, mouth open, unsure of what to say next. I got up slowly, walked over to her, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I looked her dead in the eyes, no fear, no hesitation. "You want to talk about betrayal, Sarah? About ruining what we had? You have the nerve to come in here and play the victim after everything you've done? Do you even hear yourself? You slept with Lisa," she shot back, like that was her trump card, like it was going to change everything. "You're no better than me." I laughed, a bitter, harsh sound that cut through the tension in the room. "Yeah, I did. And you know why? Because you did it first. I was tired of living in this lie, tired of pretending we were still something we weren't. I paid you back, Sarah. Let's be real, you had it coming." Her face twisted in anger, but there was something else there too, shame, guilt. I saw it, clear as day, and it felt strangely satisfying. For the first time, I didn't care about her tears or the way her voice cracked. I didn't care that she was hurting. All I cared about was making her face the truth, to finally own up to what she had done. "It wasn't like that," she mumbled weakly, struggling to keep up the act. I didn't mean for this to happen, Danny. I was confused, I was lonely. You don't understand. I don't understand." I cut her off, stepping closer as the anger bubbled up inside me. "You're right, Sarah, I don't understand. I don't understand how you could do this to me, to our marriage. I don't understand how you could look me in the eyes every day and lie, over and over again. And don't even start with the excuses. You were lonely. Well, guess what? I was lonely too, but I didn't go running off with the neighbor. That was all you." That was when she broke. Her defenses crumbled, and the tears came flooding down. "I'm sorry," she sobbed, her hands trembling as she reached out to touch me. "I'm so sorry, Danny. I never meant to hurt you. Please, we can fix this. We can try again, I swear." "Stop," I said, pulling away from her touch like it was poison. "There's no fixing this, Sarah. No trying again. I'm done. You made your choice, and now you've got to live with it. We both do." And that was it. I walked out of the room, leaving her standing there in her mess of tears and regret, and for once, I didn't look back. There was nothing left to save, nothing left to fight for. I was done pretending. Over the next few days, everything exploded. Word got around the neighborhood, how could it not, with all the yelling and slamming doors, and suddenly, our once peaceful block became a battlefield. Jack tried to confront me a couple of times, but I shut him down quick. He'd come over acting all self-righteous, trying to paint me as the villain, but I wasn't having any of it. "Go fix your own marriage, Jack," I told him. "Or don't. I don't give a damn. But stay the hell out of my face." Lisa wasn't having any of it either. I remember seeing her and Jack screaming at each other in their driveway one night, and that's when it really hit me how far we'd all fallen. What used to be this picture-perfect scene of two happy couples had turned into a full-blown war zone, and the lines were clearly drawn. There was no going back. Lisa filed for divorce the very next week, and I knew I had to do the same. The whole thing felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life fall apart. Meetings with lawyers, dividing up the house, arguing over who got what, it all felt like a blur. But it was real, and I had no choice but to face it. Sarah, of course, tried to make it all about saving what we had. She'd call, text, show up at the house unannounced, begging for one more chance, saying we could go to therapy, start fresh, all that crap. I'd never seen her so desperate, so pathetic. I didn't know if she was more afraid of losing me, or losing the life we had built together. But either way, it didn't matter. My mind was made up. "Why, Danny," she cried one day, standing in our kitchen, clutching a half-empty bottle of wine like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. "Why can't we just try? I know I messed up, I know I hurt you, but we can make it better. Please, I love you." I looked at her, really looked at her, and all I saw was a stranger. A stranger who had lied, cheated, and destroyed everything we once had. "I don't love you anymore, Sarah," I said, my voice calm and final. "And you don't love me either. Maybe we did once, but not anymore. And I'm not going to spend the rest of my life pretending that's enough." She broke down then, collapsing onto the floor, sobbing like her world had just crumbled. And maybe it had. But I didn't comfort her. I didn't hold her or tell her it was going to be okay. I let her cry, let her feel every ounce of the pain she had caused. I wasn't going to be her savior anymore. She didn't deserve it. And that was that, the end of our marriage, the end of the lies. As much as it felt like 1,000 knives stabbing me in the chest, I knew it was the right thing to do. I couldn't keep living in that nightmare, couldn't keep pretending we could somehow go back to what we once had. Jack and Sarah could have each other for all I cared. They deserved each other, two lying, cheating snakes tangled in their own toxic mess. As for me, I was ready to burn it all down and start over. Ready to take back my life, piece by piece. Filing for divorce wasn't a relief, though. It felt more like diving headfirst into a storm that would tear apart whatever was left of my old life. And if you think ending a marriage is just about signing some papers and calling it quits, think again. It's long, messy, and brutal. With Sarah, it felt like a never-ending war. I still remember that first meeting with my lawyer, sitting across from a guy who seemed way too calm considering the baggage I was about to unload. I laid it all out there, every ugly detail, the cheating, the lies, the confrontation. It was like tearing open an old wound and letting it bleed all over that sterile office. My lawyer just nodded along, taking notes, already planning how to carve up my life into pieces. The whole process was absolute hell. Sarah wasn't about to let things go smoothly, and any hope I had for a clean break disappeared the second she brought her own lawyer into the picture. Suddenly, it was all about money, property, and who got what. She wanted the house, of course. She wanted alimony too, claiming she needed financial support because her career wasn't as stable as mine. The nerve of it stunned me. Here was a woman who had spent who knows how long cheating on me, and now she expected me to bankroll her future. Not a chance. We fought over everything, the car, the furniture, even the damn coffee maker. Every meeting, every email from her lawyer felt like a dagger aimed right at me. But don't get me wrong, I wasn't about to let her walk away with whatever she wanted just to avoid a fight. I was done rolling over for her, done letting her control how things ended. I pushed back hard. I made sure my lawyer knew exactly what we were dealing with and that we'd fight for a fair split of everything, nothing more, nothing less. The arguments were endless, bleeding into every part of my life, work, sleep, even when I tried to distract myself with friends or hobbies, it all circled back to this never-ending battle. Every time I thought we were close to a resolution, Sarah would pull some new trick, dragging it out just a little bit longer. Maybe she thought I'd eventually cave, throw in the towel, and give her whatever she wanted. But I wasn't that guy anymore. During all of this, I didn't hear much from Jack, not directly, anyway. Lisa and I had agreed early on to fight our own battles, to not keep dragging each other into the mess. After that one explosive night, we both realized that whatever we shared, whatever we did, wasn't something we could carry forward. It was a moment, just a flash of revenge and raw emotion. It wasn't something real. We didn't regret it, but we both knew it wasn't the start of anything new. We were just two people finding comfort in the wreckage of our lives, and that was okay. Lisa and I stayed in touch, supporting each other as we both slogged through our divorces. But it was different now, strictly platonic, more like two survivors helping each other make it out of the fire. And that's exactly what we needed. No drama, no expectations, just an understanding that we'd both been through hell, and we were still standing. It was around that time I started to claw my way back to something that resembled a life of my own. It wasn't easy. I didn't even know where to start. For months, my whole world had revolved around Sarah, first our marriage, and then the slow process of tearing it apart. But now it was just me. Just Danny. And I had to figure out what that actually meant. I hit the gym hard. I'd always worked out here and there, but this time, it was different. It wasn't about getting in shape or looking good. It was about having somewhere to pour all that rage, all that pain, and sweat it out until the only thing left was exhaustion. And in a weird way, it worked. Each workout was like chiseling away at the broken pieces of me, slowly rebuilding who I was, bit by bit. There were days I didn't want to go, days when all I wanted was to lie in bed and let the world pass me by. But every time I pushed through, I felt a little bit stronger. Outside of the gym, I started picking up old hobbies, things I'd let slip away over the years. I dusted off my guitar, started strumming again, letting the music drown out the noise in my head. I started hiking, fishing, anything to get away from everything that reminded me of my old life. I even reconnected with friends I hadn't seen in years, guys I'd drifted away from because I'd been too wrapped up in my marriage. And man, it felt good. It felt good to laugh, to drink, to just be myself without constantly looking over my shoulder, wondering what Sarah was doing, where she was, or who she was with. Each day got a little easier than the one before. I started sleeping better, waking up without that heavy weight pressing down on my chest. Sure, there were moments when memories hit me out of nowhere, when I'd get a flash of what we used to have, and yeah, it hurt. But I was learning to let those moments pass, to not grip them so tightly. Because holding on to the past was like clenching broken glass, nothing but pain and blood. The divorce dragged on, of course, but it became more like background noise. Sarah and I barely spoke, only communicating through our lawyers. And honestly, that was just fine with me. With each passing day, I felt the grip of that old life loosen, and I could see a new horizon forming in the distance, a future that didn't have her in it. It's funny how going through something like this changes you, not just in the ways you expect, but in ways you never saw coming. I didn't walk out of this with a new love or some fairy tale ending, but I came out of it stronger, clearer about what I wanted and who I was. And that felt like enough. For once, I wasn't trying to fix someone else's life or patch up a broken marriage. I was just living, one day at a time, one step at a time, moving forward. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe again. The weight had finally lifted. I was free. The day my divorce was finalized wasn't some big celebration. It was more of a quiet end to a brutal chapter. Once it was done, I felt the storm had finally passed. Sarah and I were over, the ties cut, and the anger I had been carrying around with me started to fade. I forgave her, not because she deserved it, but because I needed to let go and move on. Life after the divorce was about rediscovery. I had to relearn how to live for myself, rebuild my routine, and find joy in things that had nothing to do with us. I hit the gym hard, picking up new habits, running, boxing, even hiking. Anything that made me feel alive again. I reconnected with old friends, picked up my guitar, and just enjoyed the simple things. Each step brought me closer to who I was, or maybe even who I was meant to be. As for Laura and me, we didn't pursue anything beyond friendship after that night. It was something we both needed at the time, but it didn't define our future. We supported each other through the divorce process, shared our struggles, but kept things strictly platonic. I was grateful for that. We both needed a fresh start, a clean slate. I started dating again, going out more, and meeting new people. I wasn't rushing into anything, just living. And yeah, every now and then, Sarah's memory would pop up, but the sting wasn't there anymore. Instead of clinging to the past, I learned to let it go, finding comfort in my own company in the new life I was building. Every struggle, every sleepless night had shaped me into someone stronger, happier. And when I looked in the mirror, I finally recognized the person staring back. It wasn't about forgetting what happened, it was about moving forward and finding peace in who I had become. And that was enough.